Welcome to Quorum. Tonight we're talking about elementary and high schools in the state. That's right, tonight's topic is education. Tonight we're joined by two legislators who are on the front lines of education in the state. From the Senate, we're joined by Senator Angela Hill. She is currently in her first term as a senator. Her district includes Marion, Pearl River, and Walthall counties. She's a Republican and a former science teacher. From the House, we have another new legislator, Representative Nick Bain. He is serving his first term in the House. His district includes Alcorn County, and he is a Democrat and an attorney. And we welcome you both. Thank you both for coming in this evening. As always, we want to hear from you tonight. There are several ways you can get in touch with us. Give us a call, 1-877-405-5247. Send an email to quorum@mpbonline.org, or if you use Twitter, just use the hashtag Quorum. First off this evening, earlier today, senators voted 34-17 to agree to a bill that would pave the way to expand charter schools in the state. The measure, as passed, allows students from anywhere in the state to attend a charter school. School boards in 32 highly rated districts would have a veto over charter schools, but schools could be set up in any other district once approved by a new 7-member commission that would be created by the bill. Let's take a listen to some of the floor debate.
You know why we're busy in the state? A lot of it has to do with the fact that 16,000 students are dropping out.
There's a silver bullet that guarantees that our dropout rate is going to improve here as a result of establishing charter schools. Where does the bill say that?
We have had 20 years of charter school laws in states across the country, 41 states, and we have the benefit of looking at the best charter laws across this country and adopting this legislation. And I have tried to do my best to make sure we adopt the best practices so that we can prevent, as well as we can, any bad charters and make sure we have high quality charter schools.
How many resources, Mr. Chairman, could we ways experiment with folks that are not required to meet the requirements of the state? How much time and how much resources we could lose experimenting with something that they are not required to be state required?
So I think it might be that this becomes law in a charter school. There probably be some teachers very interested in being a part of this. I'll tell you, the kid Delta School, first year teacher makes $36,000. First year teacher across the river in Mississippi makes $30,000. That's a $6,000 difference. So you look at things like that, there may be a lot of interest in teaching in a public charter school and some freedom from the classroom and flexibility to do the job. What they want to do is teach the students and see that they achieve and reach proficiency levels. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for our teachers in the classroom because it's focused on academics and teaching our students with innovative teaching models. Thank you.
And that bill now goes to the House for debate. Senator Hill, let's start with you. You voted in favor of that bill today. Why?
I believe in the bill. I believe that it's time that parents have a choice in the education of their children. And with the current situation in education, with the dropout rate that we have in the state of Mississippi and the lack of correlation in our proficiency test scores to translate out to a national proficiency level, it's time that we crawl before we walk and allow some freedom, flexibility, and some innovation in education. And I think this is a step toward that. It's certainly not a panacea or a silver bullet, but I think it is a tool that we can use to begin to be very innovative and to bring some autonomy into certain areas where students need to be able to have some more flexibility in their education.
Representative Bain, we mentioned that it comes over to the House next. If it remains in its current form on the House side, how do you think it will fare?
On the House side, you know, I think it will do just as it did in the Senate. I think it'll pass. I think there'll be a lot of obstruction from this, from different groups, whether it be Democrats or even members of the Republicans. I know there are some members of the Republicans that are going to have a tough choice in whether to vote for this bill.
Because on the Senate side, there was no Republican that voted against it. All 31 Republicans voted in favor of it. There were 3 Democrats who voted for it, 17 Democrats in the Senate who voted against it. So it's not exactly along party lines, but pretty much along party lines. Republicans supported this bill, Democrats did not. Are we going to see the same thing on your side?
I think for the large part you will, but I think there are some districts that the House and that those members of the House represent. They've got, like in DeSoto County and some of those large districts, they've got a tough choice to make.
Well, let's just step back from it a minute. We've been talking a lot about charter schools. It's been in the news a lot lately. Explain to us, Senator Hill, what exactly is a charter school? What makes it different from a school that's already up and running now?
A charter school is still going to be a public school, but it is going to have more flexibility in determining their curriculum, their methods of instruction, their testing procedures, their learning environment, just more autonomy and more flexibility and creativity and less regulation than the traditional public schools have, but yet they will still, whatever accountability model is developed, and the State Department is in the process of developing a new accountability model, they will still be required to complete that accountability model, but there will be standards above and beyond that state accountability model that charter schools will put in.
How is that better than a school as it exists now that follows more strictly the curriculum the state sets out?
I feel like you will have a more rigorous curriculum in the charter schools. You will have more autonomy to get performance out of students in the charter schools. You'll have a commitment to begin with whenever the students enter the charter schools. You'll have a commitment that these students want to work hard and want to succeed. And I think the environment and the flexibility to not have as much bureaucracy in these charter schools and to have more flexibility in how classrooms are run and how teachers are evaluated or chosen or whatever. You'll have all that into the mix. And I just think the autonomy and getting out from under some of the bureaucracy will be a positive, and hopefully if we see some success, and I think we will, then some of that will probably translate all across the state into the public school systems, but we have to crawl before we walk.
We probably have some folks who might be in favor of the concept of a charter school, don't like maybe some of the provisions of a given bill, so that's part of this process, is that it's eventually formed into something that everybody can agree on. But Representative Bain, do you like the idea of a charter school? Do you think it's something that Mississippi should allow?
I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to it. Let me preface this by saying I come from Alcorn County. We have 2 school districts, Alcorn County School District and Corinth School District. Mm-hmm. Both of those are good schools. I'm a product of those schools, and I believe in the public school system. I believe that we need to foster that, and I understand that in every district is not like Alcorn County, and you can't paint every district with every county, every district with the same brush. Mm-hmm. And that's the issue, and that's why this bill's got to be so precise. It's got to be very specific, and we got to use, in essence, a scalpel instead of a meat cleaver. We've got to be very precise about this, and if it meets that requirement, I don't have a problem supporting it.
Senator Hill, explain this. It's not really veto power, but the way this bill is written, that the schools we mentioned in the higher rated districts, the 32 highly rated districts in the state, would have quote unquote veto over a charter school idea. What does that mean?
Well, the difference, as the bill is written now, in star and high performing schools, basically, in order for a charter application to be submitted, there would have to be a majority vote of the school board in high-performing or star districts, whereas in successful or below, there would be 3 ways to initiate a charter application. You could have a majority petition signatures of a majority of the parents, or a majority signature petition of the teachers, or the local boards could have a majority vote to initiate a charter application.
So there are more ways under this bill to initiate the process than there would be for a a school that is performing better.
Exactly.
Because some folks have said, I like the idea of a charter school, but only in low-performing districts. And I guess is the presumption there that if they're high-performing, they're okay as it is, there's no need for this?
Well, I think even in high-performing and star school districts, I can give you instances where I would see a need or a benefit for it, because in those areas, or in any area, not just in high-performing or star areas, in any county or geographical region, I could see the need for a specialty-themed charter school, such as a dyslexia school, a science and math school, possibly an allied health school. You may see themed schools, charter schools that would cater to specific needs of students, and that's not prohibited in this bill.
What about the cost of it? Would this cost more to do something like this?
I think potentially it would, and they say that the money follows the child, and that's true. It will, as far as the public funding will follow the child. But what concerns me, and I didn't have the luxury of going to the debate and seeing if this question was actually posed, but what concerns me is if you have a student that's not in the system, such as that goes to private school, let's say a student that goes to Jackson Academy, and all of a sudden their parents want to quit paying that tuition, they come to this charter school. That money's not going to follow that child, which is going to take money away from a district that might have had in the past. So that concerns me a little bit, and may cost a little bit more money in that respect.
Okay, we have a question about money via email, and this person emails this question to us. What about a state lottery system benefiting education? We talked about how much education costs, and lottery is a whole separate issue, but they've been tied together before and in other states. Could either of you support a statewide lottery to benefit education?
I'm not in favor of a lottery.
No, I would not support it.
There are people who, when the jackpot gets up to a certain level, you can cross the river over in Louisiana from certain Mississippi towns and see a long line. But you don't like the idea here in
I don't know.
Okay, well that answers that. We have a phone call now of someone calling in a question to us. This is Charles in Hattiesburg. Charles, go ahead with your question, please.
How do you do? My question is dealing with the money, dealing with the county and state appropriations for the education. As you know, the county and city appropriates their state money, their money for their education with the state. Will charter schools affect the money of these different funding sources? Would this charter law force the cities and the county school system, force them to pay the money to the charter schools?
So would it change the way the money is distributed, I guess, is the question.
It would not change the way the money is distributed. The money that would have been distributed to that student in the current school that he was going to would follow that student to a new school if he were to attend a charter school. But it would be that same per pupil percentage that's made up of those three funding sources that would follow that student. So that's why this is not a revenue bill, because there's no new money in the bill. This is only authorizing. So you're going to see companies that will either borrow money or get an endowment, some type of donation to help get the school started, because all you will have coming out of government funding is that per pupil ratio that one student carries with him wherever they go, based on what that current district already has in place.
Because are we talking about building new physical schools that would be called charter schools, or are we talking about converting an existing school or a portion of an existing school to a charter school? How does this physically work?
Either or, I believe.
Yes, either or. There'd be a provision for either.
Either way you want to do it, and in some aspects, a district could charter it or ask itself apply to become a charter school district,
where you can convert the
by those
convert
methods
the whole
that I
district.
Described earlier, by either of those three methods that I described, by board majority, parent majority, teacher majority, to petition, and of course also there's a provision in the bill that allows for community input also. So you would have a forum for input from the community, and you would solicit support from that community also.
All right, we have another caller on the line with a question about all this. This is Paul in Jackson. Paul, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, I was talking to find out, is this another way of phasing out of your public schools? And also, if charter schools going to take over the whole mechanism of the school system, is this some type of way of getting rid of public schools? And if it is, how would the public schools survive with both of these systems running at the same time?
Could these choke the current system, I guess, to death is one way of looking at that question. Is that something, could we end up with a situation where we have all charter schools and no traditional public schools left?
I think that's why it's got to be very narrow and very specific. We cannot do away with our traditional public schools.
Because they'd still all be public schools.
They still would.
But the
and
traditional
that's not the intent. Hopefully, the charter schools would become more or less, in the long run, a model.
For the whole system?
For the whole, I would like to see it be a model for the whole system eventually. But like I said, you have to walk before you crawl.
So the public school system would be like a charter
this
school.
This will always be a public school system. These charter schools will be public schools. They will just be innovative, special public schools. But I don't foresee the public school system ever being replaced. I mean, by charter schools.
And I don't either. And we have to maintain our public schools.
Right.
That's the foundation.
Absolutely.
Because once again, like I said earlier, I don't believe every district needs a charter school.
All right, we have another caller on the line with a question. Anthony calling from Poplarville. Anthony, go ahead, please.
My question is directed to Angela. Hi, Angela.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay. My question is that, Angela, I realize that we have a diversity of needs throughout the state. When you move from the south end of the state, maybe to the northern end of the state, things are quite different. And I was just wondering, how would charter schools be implemented into our area, which is down in the southern part of the state? And also, if the money is going to follow the student, I'm concerned about what's left for the original school districts, because of course the facilities will stay the same. You're probably going to have the same amount of administrators and teachers, and you just can't shut down a part of a school. And I just wonder how that would affect those things.
That's a good question. If the money follows the pupil and many of the pupils leave the school, what happens to that school they left?
Well, there would be a cutoff deadline for the amount for the students who would apply to the charter school. So the public school that those students were coming from would have ample notice, at least over a year, to be able to plan and make arrangements for those students that they're losing.
To plan for having less money, essentially.
To plan for having less money, and that's going to be, something that's going to have to be worked out district by district, because there's no way that you can predict a number from this school or that school that may be going to a charter school. But from the date of passage of this bill, on final passage, we estimate that it would be at least 2 years before any charter school would be operational, because of having to go through the application and the planning stage. But that is certainly a valid question, but the school would have ample planning time to try to revamp their budget and their program to accommodate the number that they would have in the next coming year.
But you said there's a provision for a cutoff to where
yes, there will be a cutoff date that school would be able to know definitely how many students they were losing.
So not a cutoff for the funding, but a cutoff for when they're notified.
Yes, they would have ample notification that they were losing X number of students, to the charter school.
A question via email now, and this viewer writes, are charter schools another experiment with our education system? What evidence is there that charter schools are worthwhile?
The evidence is mixed, to be honest with you. And from what I've read and researched, it's just like any other public education system. You've got good ones, you got bad ones. That's why it's imperative that we get this bill correct, follow those models that have worked, and like I said before, if that's the case, then I would not have any hesitation in supporting the bill. That was one issue I know of the amendment that they passed in committee. They had a virtual charter schools. The reason why is that they have not been proven successful, and I commend the Senate on doing that. That made the bill a whole lot more attractive and strengthened the bill. But again, it's a mixed bag, just like with regular public schools.
Well, I know you don't speak for all Democrats, but being the Democrat on the program tonight, what could be different about this bill, at least in your body, in your side of the Capitol there, do you think could be different to make Democrats support it?
For the ones I've talked to, the Democrats that I've talked to, they want to make sure And some of them want to see it not be limited to districts, but to schools. And like you have well, they want to make sure that the school, even if it's in a high-performing district, that a school could close its doors and become a charter school. They don't want it to just be about the districts, but about the individual schools, about the children specifically. And a lot of them want to make sure that it is 100% nonprofit, that no one's going to be lining your pockets, if you will, getting rich off of this program. And that's,
so some stopgaps in there.
There's got to be some safeguards.
And of course they'll be subject to audit, and the same type business things will be looked at. Although they will have more autonomy in how they spend their money, they will still be subject to public audit.
All right, well, let's move on. Still, of course, on the topic of education, because that's what we're talking about tonight. What about funding for schools? In particular, we talk about MAEP a lot, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. What do you think, the two of you think, that the chances are of getting that fully funded, if not this year, in the coming years? What will it take to reach that point?
Well, it needs to be. In 1997, we passed a law to fund it. So every year that we don't fund it, we break the law. We break the law, and the idea behind it was to provide adequate, equitable education to every student and to give the districts what they need to succeed. Every year we don't do that, we're seeing what we see now is districts struggling to provide that adequate education. So my take is, let's give this flexibility that we're giving charter schools, let's give this money that we're giving charter schools, let's fully fund education and see what happens.
Senator Hill? Do you think that there's a chance of fully funding it in the coming years?
Well, I think it really depends on what the economy does and how many more folks we have added to the Medicaid rolls in the state of Mississippi. Because when it comes down to the budget, you got to look at the three things that soak up the most of the budget. And of course, the biggest one is education. It's almost half the state budget.
You're talking about the overall state budget, right?
The overall state budget. Education is almost half of the overall state budget. It's some $2.5 billion. And from what state economist Darren Webb has projected to us, that we may not even see pre-Katrina levels of economic stability until possibly 2016. And we're just looking at almost stagnant revenue. We have seen a small increase in revenue and taxes, but there's not enough evidence yet to see that if that's going to just be a short-term thing or if it's going to be able to be extrapolated through several more months. So I think it's all going to depend on several factors in the state of Mississippi, and that includes the economy and whether the economy improves, and whether the amount of new people that we have coming into the Medicaid program, because you get to the point to where you're looking at funding education, you're looking at funding health care, and you're looking at funding corrections, and you have to try to balance all those because they're all vital portions of the state budget. But I support, I don't support cutting the funding that they have. I support trying to at least maintain level funding for what we have right now. I would love to have more money in education, and I'd like to be the one to tell them where to spend it. And it'd go in that classroom. If I was the one telling them where to spend it, it wouldn't go into the administration.
Well, it's not unlike having a budget, a household budget, when you list your essential expenses. I mean, your mortgage and your lights and your gas, the things that you have to pay. And it seems like in Mississippi, year after year, at least since the economy has not been doing well, those essential, quote-unquote, fixed expenses are the ones that aren't getting fully funded just because of the way the economy is.
Yeah, that's basically true.
You're right, and it should be noted that a lot of school districts around the state have some reserve funds, and they're being asked to tap into these reserve funds. You talk about a household budget, running your home on a budget, and when you're prudent, you've got money left over. And usually the people that are there, they're not going to be punished or for having that money. And essentially asking school districts to go into their reserves to help fund the overall state budget, I think is imprudent and is something that we do not need to go down.
All right, another hot topic, school consolidation. It has been discussed for years. Some say it would hold school funding it would by cutting administrators. It would reduce it would help school funding by cutting some of the what some people call the excess in the administrative lines. How do y'all feel about that? I'll start with you.
Consolidation. I've got a trouble with saying it's going to save money. We fund schools on a per student basis. Like in Alcorn County, they're going to get the money that they want, or the money that they get based on the students that they have. It's not necessarily going to save any money. I think you have to, again, be very surgical here. Look at the districts. What is this going to save us?
But you've got, in those districts, you've got to pay the superintendent, an assistant superintendent. You've got to pay all of these. The argument that I've heard is that in some, not necessarily the county you're talking about, but in some counties you've got these multiple school districts that have a relatively small number of students, but each one has a superintendent. Exactly. Each one has all these layers. And could we not save some money by eliminating some of that, or lowering the salaries?
I think so. Again, I said a case by case basis. Yeah. We've got to look at that. And a lot of times it may just boil down to the get more efficient administrators, and that's like what you said, cutting administrators out. Certainly, cut the fat and weigh the costs and the benefits.
Well, one example of a concrete cost savings is the fact that when the Senate consolidated the 3 schools in Sunflower County, right, the numbers that we were given was that consolidation of those 3 schools would save $1.2 million per year in administrative cost.
So is that something we might see elsewhere, or that we should see elsewhere? What do you think?
It's possible, and I kind of agree with Nick. I would have to see that the hard numbers. I would like to see the studies and the hard numbers as to how much money it actually would save. Because
who's to say one district is not fully efficient and has just the right number of administrators, and the county next door might be totally top-heavy and a mess, as far as an economist might say, looking at it.
Exactly. And the argument on that side is you have some school districts that are functioning perfectly well, and if it's not broke, don't fix it. And that's certainly an argument that we have to look at, but we also have to look at the fact that many school districts are very, very top-heavy in administrative cost. I mean, in some districts, I think the instructional portion of the budget is like 37%. And when you see that, you got a problem.
All right. Well, talking about administrators, in some states the superintendents are not appointed. They are elected. Is that something that we should look at, the way that superintendents get their jobs?
I think it's something that may be evaluated. Now, again, in my district, we have elected and appointed. Our county school is elected, and our city is appointed.
Which do you think is better?
Both of mine do a good job, and certainly you've got the elected where you've got people can go out there and do something about it. They can change it every 4 years. You've got the appointed. If they're not happy, they can go to the school board and try to change that. So both of them have some checks and balances from the public. Certainly elected, you've got maybe a little bit more of a political overtones where they don't want to step on anybody's toes, maybe. So you got that. Both of them got their problems and their advantages.
I agree, and I don't see that either one, that either all elected or all appointed is going to be a cure-all or possibly even make that much of a significant difference in how things operate, because in my experience, I've seen both work well, and I've seen both work to the negative. Both appointed and elected. I've seen the good and the bad of both. So that's why I can't really say that I would make a hard, firm stand on that, because I've seen it work to the good and I've seen it work to the bad in both instances.
All right, well, you're watching Quorum, and we do welcome your comments and questions for our guests tonight. If you'd like to phone in a question, you can reach us at 1-877-405-5247. You can send us an email at quorum@mpbonline.org, or you can reach us through Twitter by using the hashtag Quorum. And we go to the phones now. We have a caller waiting for us. This is Henry, who is calling us from Terry. Henry, go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, guys, I know you're working hard, but my question is, why the class system? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, why the class system divides us between private and public? I come up in the public school system, went through desegregation, and I know that, most of the money people said we're going to kill the private school system, the public school system. in favor of private, but all that does is hurt the children. I mean, if you put it all together, everybody gets equal opportunity, and right now we don't have that. We have a class system in this country, and I think all these arguments could be solved just by looking at that. Okay, you're go ahead.
So a class system, I guess he's saying that if you can afford it, you go to private school, and if you can't, you go to a public school. That's not. Is that true in every district, though?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's quite a few people in all across my district that could afford to send their children to a private school if they wanted to, but they choose the public for whatever reason. And as far as a class system, this charter school is a great remedy for somebody of low economic means or little economic means to be able to get out of a failed school system and not have to put any money out of their pocket and let that money follow them into a new school system. This is a tool that crosses all economic, race, any type of barrier, demographic lines. The charter school concept is open to every child.
Representative?
And I understand from the Senate bill that was one of the things that had in there, that had to be, the demographics of a charter school had to reflect that of a corresponding school, which I commend that, and I think that's a good idea. But undoubtedly there's a class system that there is. Where I'm from, we don't have public schools. Everybody's...
You don't have private schools?
I mean private schools, I'm sorry. We don't have private schools. Everybody's goes kind of funneled into that public. It works well there. It's a local issue. It's something that, you know, if people want to send their kids to private school, they have that right.
And we have some private schools in our area also, and I've had people of very little means that choose to send their kids to a private Christian school, and I've had several of them tell me, I don't really have the money to do this, but I'm so committed that I would pick up cans if I had to, to keep my child in this school. And it's just a matter of parental preference. What is meeting the needs of that child? And nobody can make that decision better than that parent.
All right, let's go back to the phones now. We have a phone call from Wes, who's calling from Jackson. Wes, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, I'm trying to understand the application process. If you have a charter school, and let's say I live next door to a charter school and my child wants to go to the charter school, or let's say that he does apply or I apply, and then for some reason he's not approved to attend that school. I'm trying to understand for what reasons that he might not be approved, and what would be the reason, let's say, if he didn't apply, if my family didn't apply for my child to attend that school, which we did live next door to, would he then not be allowed to go to the school? It seems like if you have to make an application to go to a school which was still considered public, somebody might be left out. So I'm trying to understand how or why a child would not be approved, because if there is an application process, somebody's going to attend and someone will not be able to attend.
So, in a nutshell, how do you get in? Is that outlined in the current bill?
Basically, anybody that would like for their child to be in that charter school would just have to make that known, and that is part of the planning stage for the charter school to see how many students show an interest, and then the charter school would develop their plan of action based on how many students they would have wanting to apply to that school, and then try to accommodate that number. Where you would run into the fact that maybe you would not have enough space to accommodate a student or whatever, maybe probably once a charter school is already up and running, and then people see that it's working, and then you may have at one time more students wanting to get in than what the facilities could hold, until the facilities could be expanded, because if there's more interest, that charter school is going to try to expand those facilities because they want to be able to accommodate those kids. And if it got to the point to where it ran out of space and there were more kids wanting to go to that charter school, or if it was beginning to run out of space, there would be a lottery. So there would be no discrimination as far as who got in and who didn't. It would just be basically first come, first served in who applied, and then as they begun to fill up, you may see it go to a lottery system if you had a greater number than what that school could accommodate at that time.
So you could have a situation where students are turned away because of space. But could they be turned away for, because is there a way they couldn't qualify? Because we're not talking about schools for gifted children necessarily.
No, it's supposed to be a non-discriminatory application process.
So the application then is a formality then?
It's basically a formality.
You're stating your intent to go to that school?
Yes, you're just stating your intent that you want to go to this school.
Okay. Let's move on to teacher pay. Are we paying our teachers enough? Are we paying them enough to get their job done, to attract new teachers to the classroom? Representative Bain, I'll let you take that.
Yeah.
I think I know what the answer is, but the bigger question is, what do we do about it? Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to sound biased in my answer because my wife is a teacher, so I don't want to sound like I got a vested interest. So are we paying
but
teachers?
You do. Are
we paying teachers enough? Certainly, the answer to that is no. They do a tremendous job, and they do stuff.
No, we don't pay them enough, you're saying.
That was your question. Do we pay them enough?
Just wanted to clarify, right?
Right, yes. They need to be paid more, and we need to make sure that they get the money that they are entitled to. They do a tremendous job, like I was saying. I've sat in on my wife's classes, and the stuff that they just, I mean, you've got to be a babysitter, a teacher, a counselor, a pastor, whatever. And you've got to wear so many hats, and they deserve more money, and they deserve more credit.
Senator Hill, you used to be a teacher. You ought to be able to speak authoritatively on this.
Well, I felt like I didn't get enough pay, and I felt like I paid too many taxes out of what I did get.
Well, there's two different issues.
Yeah, but you know, it really depends on the teacher. I mean, certainly I would like to see teachers treated as a higher level professional than what they are. I would like to see the entrance requirements for teacher programs and the exit requirements for teacher programs elevated, and that way, you know, we would have higher quality people wanting to go into the teacher profession whenever it became a more sought after and a more rigorous process to get into it. But if you consider the time that a good teacher spends at home trying to actually do her work to prepare for her classroom, aside from the fact of all the paperwork that's put out that they have to do, most teachers, you know, people say you get this time off in the summer, so you're paid adequately, but I still feel like the amount of time that a teacher puts in outside of that classroom, a teacher now that's doing her job and doing a good job, is not compensated, I don't think, enough. And I'm sure that I'll have some of my Republican counterparts disagree with me, but my answer to some of those folks, you go in that classroom for 2 or 3 days and then tell me how you feel.
Well, we hear stories too about, on top of that, teachers having to pay for supplies to do their job out of their salary, out of their own pocket. What can the state do to keep that from happening? Because we're talking about the fact that you both agree that teachers aren't paid enough just to get the job done. Well, if they're using part of that pay to get some of the basic supplies to get the job done, what can be done about that?
Well, I mean, the only thing to do is allocate the money for the teachers to do it. I mean, I don't know any short answer, but you're right. Many times teachers go in and have to buy supplies, or worse, they'll put it off on their student to buy supplies and bring those in. And that's something that if you're paying the taxes for the services of the school, that I don't believe that the students should have to bear that cost.
Well, we used to get what's called EEF money in some districts. Many still get a little bit of EEF money, but it's certainly not what it was before the economic downturn and before some of these other, you know, fuel prices, among other things, basically raised the price of everything across the board. And just like with your home budget, when your state budget, when you have to absorb all these fuel costs and things from all the different agencies and departments of the state, you're certainly going to have less revenue. But I feel like supplies is a crucial thing, and I feel like if we could get administrative costs under control, we would be able to channel more money into that classroom where it belongs. But getting back to teacher pay, you know, we need to be able to reward and pay good teachers, and we've traditionally not, across the state of Mississippi in public schools, we have traditionally not gotten rid of teachers who are, you know, mediocre to, you know, not doing just a great job. And that's something that you know, is always thrown into the mix. Well, is that teacher that's in this school that's doing, you know, not so great of a job, why should we pay that teacher whenever, you know, they're not doing such of a great job? But, you know, you'll have another teacher in that other district that just works. So there needs to be more of an evaluative model for teacher pay.
Because the way they do that now, just to evaluate a teacher's performance, is that not done with test scores? And you look at the test scores to see how the and then judge the
It's not just test scores. It's, I mean, there's a process as to where somebody goes in and actually watches that teacher teach, looks at her lesson plans. There's more than test scores that go into that. There's many ways that you can measure success with a teacher, but of course test scores is the primary one that you're going to look at.
Well, because Representative Bain, how do you think we should evaluate teachers? I mean, should that be done on the local level, or should there be some formula that the state uses, whether it's test scores or whatever, to evaluate?
It all goes back to the local level for me. You've got to look at the individual teacher, and you've got to look at because you can't evaluate everybody with the same formula, because you've got something. One teacher has something that another one doesn't, and that's a different child. And you don't know what that child learned coming into the class. You don't know what his home life's like. So you don't know. The variables are so mixed there, and you've got to. It's an individual, local situation.
And I agree with that. It depends on the mix that a teacher gets, what type of student she gets, as to how successful. I mean, any child can learn in the right environment, but it really depends on the type of students that teacher gets, and their background, and how far behind they are when that particular teacher gets them, as to how far that teacher can bring them in regards to test scores.
So the same teacher could be a different, could get different results with different groups of children.
Oh, absolutely.
And I guess that stands to reason. We have Gail in Grenada on the phone with us now. Gail, go ahead with your question, please. Gail?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, my question is, with the charter schools, how is this different from using public funds for private schools, considering that you're eliminating assessments, you're eliminating teacher qualifications, you're eliminating the curriculum, and you're eliminating special ed rules? If you would eliminate that for everyone, it will solve a multitude of problems. So tell me how this is different from using public funds to fund a private school.
Senator Hill, you were shaking your head through some of that.
You're not eliminating special ed rules. You're not eliminating any of the laws that apply to students. All you're doing is having more flexibility with the curriculum, and you're not being eliminated from the evaluation instrument. You will be a part of that evaluation instrument that the other public schools are evaluated by also, but there will be other evaluation instruments besides that will be implemented in the charter schools.
Well, because the way you describe it, it sounds, when there's a question like that it gets more like, well, it is like a regular school in that regard. So it goes back to, well, what is the primary physical difference between a charter school and a regular school, if they're subject to these same reviews? What are we seem to be getting back to?
Well, they're subject to the same. They're subject to the same evaluation models, but they are given more leeway as far as how they present their curriculum, how they choose to incorporate.
Excuse me, I guess they're evaluated on the goal, but not how necessarily they got to the goal.
Exactly. The methods, they're not evaluated on the methods, but they're still evaluated on the end result.
Gotcha.
And I believe I agree with the caller to an extent that flexibility that Senator was talking about, I think we could apply that at some of the existing schools that we have instead of implementing some of these charter schools. But be that as it may,
well, go ahead. One big thing that's going to help all public schools across the state of Mississippi is it's only a matter of time before we are exempted from the No Child Left Behind requirements, and that's going to allow more flexibility to be brought back into all public schools in the state of Mississippi. So when you're freed up from some of this requirement that No Child Left Behind dictated, then the teachers in any public school will have more time to implement more methods that they so choose, rather than methods and materials and reports and paperwork that was dictated under the current system.
All right, let's go back to the phones now. Billy is calling us from Brandon. Billy, go ahead with your question, please.
Well, I don't have a question. I have a comment.
All right.
Until you get the parents involved in their children's school, you're going to have failing schools. And that's the main thing. I graduated high school in 1969. And my parents were very integrated with my school, my scores and everything. Until you get the parents involved in the kids today, you can put 99.9% of the tax dollars that comes from Mississippi, and you still gonna have failing schools. And that's the main thing.
I don't think either of you would disagree with that. The question is, what can the state do to get parents more involved in their children's education?
Well, ultimately, it's not government's place to be in the home and with the parents. That's just the bare bones about it. It is, like the caller said, I could not agree more. It's up to the parents. It's up to the child. And that's a lot of reasons. And some of the backlash on some of the charter schools is the kids that want to go there are kind of they may be the lower on the socioeconomic ladder, but they are more driven or have parents that have selected them to go there. And that's why some of these schools have been more selective. And that dovetails in what do you do with those other children who may not have those parents.
Who are left behind, essentially, at the original school.
And that's some of the issues with the charter school
currently,
bill.
they're all being left behind in these failing schools. And this will give us an option to at least have some of those parents who are begging and pleading with the state to give them some type of option and relief from getting their child, to be able to get their child out of a failing school. And I think it is our responsibility to give them a tool and an option to be able to put their child in a better school. So I don't care who that child is, what background he or she comes from, that parent should be able to have an option to put that child in a better school.
Well, if that holds true, that you've got active parents, so essentially we're going to have the parents who are very involved, their children will go to the charter school. What of the folks who are at the original school that's not a charter school, whose parents maybe aren't involved in their education, and they're back at the school that is failing according to the state, and the funding has gone with these other kids as well? What happens back at that original school?
If that school is failing and continues to fail, maybe we don't need to have that school anymore, and we may have to step in and consolidate that school just like we did the ones in Sunflower County.
But then the issue that it turns on, what about the parents, the responsibility of the parents? And ultimately it comes back to them and the child.
It absolutely does.
And that's the potential with charter schools that you're going to have. You talked about a class system earlier. You could have whole nother section of eager, earnest students who want to be a part of charter schools, and then those, like you said, what we do with them is we give them the best opportunity to succeed, and that's by giving the teachers, the administrators, an efficient roadmap with the funds that we can give them.
All right, we have another caller, Tom, calling from Starkville tonight. Tom, go ahead with your question, please.
My question is fairly simple. I'd really like to know how the funds for the 16th section are going to be applied and who would be in charge of managing the 16 sections.
That's something we haven't talked about in a while.
And simply, my question is I don't know. And just to be in quite candor, I've been here for 6 weeks. I know there is some issues and some bills, and they may discuss that in the Senate committee, but we have not discussed that. So.
And that is not something that I have worked on. The 16th section, that's just not something that I have been working on, so I'm not tremendously knowledgeable in that area either. I know that that's an area that the Secretary of State's office typically handles, and that's something that I would have to do a little research on to be able to give you a good answer for that.
So, Tom, maybe on a future program with a different array of folks with different specialties, we could address that more directly. I have a question via email now. Under the charter school bill, as it is currently written, could an existing private school apply for charter school status and be granted that?
They cannot. There is an exclusionary clause in that law that you cannot convert a current private school into a charter.
There is that, and I asked this question today to a liaison from Governor Bryant's office. My question was this: does the bill speak to, and he told me it didn't, For example, if you had a private school that shut down, say for a year, and then came back and applied as a charter school, he says that under my interpretation of it, that may be something that could happen.
So it wouldn't be exactly a private school converting, but if it disappeared and then came back as a, it's an interesting approach to it, I guess, and one of those things that'll.
And of course, that would be might be more of a legal issue than
a technical thing. Billy in Meridian on the phone with us now. Billy, go ahead with your question, please.
I think all teachers should be tested and be evaluated before they even awarded a job.
But yes, did you have a question, sir? There already are evaluations in place. I mean, you have to have certain certifications before you can be a full teacher, right?
Certifications, interviews.
And that's statewide,
right?
Isn't it?
That's as currently in the public school system. That's how it is set up statewide.
All right. Well, let's move on to talk about something else that's a problem in Mississippi, and that's the dropout rate. How do we keep children in school? How do we keep folks from dropping out, and how do we convince them that the right thing to do is to stay in school?
That's a tough one. That is a hard question. It comes back to having teachers, having administrators, I think, who work tirelessly to get that child motivated and to involve the parents, because ultimately it comes back down to the home and keeping them involved.
Senator Hill?
I think innovation, especially on the high school level, and I think the plan that Governor Bryant has set forth with the partnership with the community colleges in the early college high schools to be able to have a student determine their career path at an earlier age and then get started working toward that career path and see light at the end of a tunnel where you have a student who knows that they're not going to spend 4 years in the university, but yet they want to do something that they feel like they can be proud of and that they can contribute and that they can make a living. I think you will see that impact some students that feel like that they're wasting their time, taking tests and looking at books in high school and feel like that they're ready to go ahead and get into a career path. And I think that will be a positive. And I think the part of the charter bill that was stricken on virtual charter schools, I think that would have been a tool to help alleviate some of the students who would otherwise drop out from high school because of various sometimes social reasons and maybe even medical reasons. I think that would have been a tool to be able to have more flexibility to actually keep kids engaged and get them to the post-secondary level.
Well, it may be out now, but things that the legislature have a way of resurfacing. Explain to us what a virtual charter school would be.
It would be basically very similar to what you have as far as online college classes. You would still have an instructor that would communicate with the student. You would still have an evaluation process. You would still have face-to-face meetings. You would still have face-to-face testing procedures, but you would have a greater variety and a greater flexibility in getting the high school curriculum or any other curriculum in any other school online and be able to do it virtually. But I feel like that is a tool that certainly could help prevent the dropout rate in the high schools.
Well, this would probably be a good time to mention that MPB is trying to spread the word that staying in school is the way to go. We're doing that in two main ways. We received a $20,000 grant from the National Center for Media Engagement. Now, that money is being used to host dropout prevention town halls. The next one will be March 1st in Jackson at Provine High School. And for more information about that, you can contact us here at MPB, and the number is 601-948-4725. We also have a web program called Can I Kick It? It's aimed at keeping students in school, and you can check that out on our website at mpbonline.org. And we have another caller on the line now. This is Tiffany in Lafayette County. Tiffany, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I had a question about what can we do now with our children in reference to kids that have a genuine desire to graduate, But I found that when you go from district to district, no one has a solution for these children. For instance, you will find probably in the middle school years that these kids may have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD. And by the time they get to high school, there are gaps in their education where they may have fallen behind or what have you. No one knows what to do with these children in order to get them out of school. They have lack of social skills, so by the time they get to the high school years, you can see those social skills kind of developing. They're not being suspended for, laughing in class or can't sit still, whatever symptoms that go along with a lot of these disorders that the children come in our classrooms with. Now, in my case, specifically, my son sent me into professions to try and fight for him to get him out of school. Now we're right on the break, and I see the gap that he has in his education due to him having those behavior problems early on, but no one knows what to do to close the deal on him right now. So I'm just trying to see what is out there right now. I understand all the bills that are coming up, but, he'll be 18 this year. So, what ideas do you all have? What resources are available
for students who have special needs, special circumstances?
Today, Wilson, today in the House, we had a committee, a lunch, if you will, for teachers of the blind coming in, promoting their bill, asking for our help and support in that. And I think that's the key. It was a very similar situation. It was a blind student who they didn't have the resources. The teachers did not know how to teach the student. And I think it's just making the public aware and making the teachers aware at that particular school that he may have a problem. Let's get to it early.
I think possibly some of the programs that some of the universities are offering, and I'm not totally familiar with all the programs that are available through the different institutions of higher learning, but I know that there are some programs for special need kids in those institutions of higher learning, and that would be my suggestion was to contact the point people in the universities as far as those goals go, and let them direct her in that direction.
We're about out of time. We'll leave it at that. We thank you both for joining us, and thank you for joining us here on Quorum. We'll see you next Wednesday night.